The Creature Files, presented by the Department of Mythical Wildlife, with your hosts, author Todd Calgi Gallicano, Christopher McClary at the Sightings Desk, and resident skeptic Vic Afsahi. So sit back and listen as we report the latest news and up-to-date information about the mythical creatures living among us. The Creature Files. It might just save your life.
Hey everyone, and welcome to The Creature Files, the show that's all about mythical creatures, and that includes cryptids and creatures from folklore, whatever might be lurking in the woods or in the waters or in the skies above. I'm your host, Todd Calgi Gallicano, the author of the Sam Leonard Adventure Series from the files of the Department of Mythical Wildlife. And you can learn more about us online at www.mythicalwildlife.com. I'd like to take a moment to ask that you give us a thumbs up below, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe so you always get the latest episode of The Creature Files. Now it's time to say hello to my co-hosts. We've got Chris McClary at the Sightings Desk and our resident not-so-skeptic Vic Afsahi. Hey, guys.
Hey.
How's it going?
Okay, on to my background. As many of you know, every book in the Sam Leonard Adventure Series features a few of our national parks. And to honor that on the podcast, my background will always be a national park. Any idea which one it is this time, guys?
Can I phone a friend?
Who are you gonna call, Vic?
Yeah, and I'm gonna say it's Glacier National Park.
Vic says Glacier. Chris?
I'll say Glacier.
It is not Glacier National Park. It is Olympic National Park. Keeping with the theme of this episode, we headed to the Squatchiest state in the United States, Washington, a place where Bigfoot sightings are plentiful. Olympic National Park encompasses nearly 1 million acres. The park protects a vast wilderness, thousands of years of human history, and several distinctly different ecosystems, including glacier-capped mountains, old-growth temperate rainforests, and over 70 miles of wild coastline. There's so much to do and explore at Olympic. I can't even begin to list it all. If you're up there looking for Bigfoot or just a great time outdoors, be sure to visit Olympic National Park. Now let's go to the Sightings Desk. Chris, anything sighted out there?
Oh, as a matter of fact, there is. So we have a man reporting seeing a 7 to 8 foot tall creature walking across a rural road in Georgia. 51-year-old man, and he's driving along State Highway 515 near Cherry Log, and he suddenly sees this figure, and he slams on his brakes. He skids to the side of the road, and he claims he sees this ape-like creature, 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in fur, takes about 5 steps, and then disappears into the woods. And he's been a little concerned because he was never actually a believer in Bigfoot, and his own wife apparently isn't believing him, and he's a little worried about being ridiculed. But he claims it was not a bear. It walked straight up like a human, had long arms swinging back and forth like a monkey, and he said this is what he saw on the side of the road. So for somebody to come forward who admits to not being a true believer to begin with and having the courage to come forward, I think that's pretty significant.
Yeah, now, I mean, he didn't have any particular evidence, right? So there was no evidence that came around, but he did see it. We do have this sort of eyewitness account, right?
Yeah, for somebody who says they're not even a believer to have an eyewitness account and be afraid of ridicule even from his own wife, but still be willing to come forward, I think there's something. I think that has some validity.
Vic, do you have any comment on this?
It's interesting, and apparently there's a few stories from this area from different people who have experienced very similar things, if not the exact same thing. I think one lady talks about having a whole family of these things, like traveling across, like basically migrating across her land every October or something like that when the seasons start changing. So it's interesting, but without evidence, you just gotta, you always have to wonder. So my hope is that when people, may have a sighting, that eventually they all kind of get together and maybe set up some cameras in that area or the common wildlife trails in that area and see if they can catch something. So we can finally get something like, some hard, good footage of a Sasquatch. That'd be great.
Well, we do know that that Georgia has been a bit of a hotbed for some Bigfoot sightings, and we talked to Lyle Blackburn about Elkins Creek area. So this is interesting. This sort of fits with all of those, some of those other sightings. And this story sort of leads us into our creature feature, So today's creature feature is not about a particular creature. It's about the evidence for these creatures. As you all know, and Vic enjoys reminding us, there has been no definitive proof of creatures like Bigfoot or the skunk ape, but yet the search continues. And people all over the world are fascinated by the pursuit to find this irrefutable evidence. But waiting for that perfectly clear piece of footage or actual body often negates the evidence that does exist. And some of it is incredibly credible, as I like to say, and unexplained. Consider that there have been creatures thought to be mythical, which have suddenly been proven to be real. Creatures like the platypus, the okapi, giant squid, the frilled shark, all beasts that were at one time figments of folklore. The Bondegazoo is another great example. It's a marsupial that scientists didn't think existed all the way up to 1995. Even now, no live specimen has ever been captured, but it has been spotted by a scientific expedition back in 2009. So how do we go about proving the existence of these creatures without a live specimen? Evidence, right? So what types of evidence exist for cryptids? Well, there are obviously credible sightings by people. Some of these individuals aren't seeking fame or fortune. In fact, many refuse to even discuss their sightings for fear of sounding crazy. We talked with Lyle Blackburn about the stigma attached to talking about a sighting. I saw Bigfoot is often just a punchline. Yet these sightings occur, and frequently they happen in the same location. And here's the thing. As we talked about with Stacy Brown Jr., courts accept eyewitness testimony all the time. It's often some of the most credible evidence presented. Lawyers attempt to discredit it by challenging the witness, known as impeaching a witness, attacking their character and motivations. But here we are with all of these eyewitness accounts from different people that corroborate the same creature, and we discount them or demand additional evidence. Video and photographic evidence is another big part of proving these creatures' existence, but it seems we never have enough, or it's not clear enough or long enough, whatever the case may be. I mean, we've covered numerous sightings that have footage or photos, and frankly, most of them are blurry or indecipherable. In the age of cell phones, we should be getting great shots, or should we? I mean, these creatures aren't showing up at the local Stop and Shop. These sightings are rare and often in remote areas. Some of the most famous footage gathered is the Patterson-Gimlin film, but there are also examples of video out there as well as photographs. If Bigfoot does exist, it may just be a matter of time before we finally see the kind of photographic evidence that will be irrefutable. But I suspect even then it will be attacked by skeptics with claims of doctored images, etc., especially now with the kinds of special effects available to anyone with a computer. In addition to the photos and video, there's also audio. If you've never heard of the Sierra sounds, please go and take a listen. These are recordings that some believe to be the language of the Bigfoot. Of course, we've even played some purported Bigfoot sounds here on the Creature Files, courtesy of Gail Beatty. Then there's the physical evidence. Some have claimed to find Bigfoot hair, but many of the studies into hair have so far failed to be linked to an unknown creature. And then there are the footprints and casts of the footprints and the handprints. These types of prints have been found for decades. Can they all be hoaxes? To what end? All of this brings us to today's guest. If you haven't seen the show Finding Bigfoot on Animal Planet, when you're done listening or watching this episode, go check it out. It's an extraordinary show for anyone who considers themselves a Bigfoot enthusiast. It involves 4 investigators searching for evidence of Bigfoot and other similar creatures all over the world. In fact, during the epic 9-season run of Finding Bigfoot, the team has been to Australia looking for the Yowie, Indonesia for the Orang Pendek, Vietnam for the Wildman, China for the Yeren, Nepal for the Yeti, the United Kingdom for their version of Bigfoot, Brazil for the Mapinguari, Hawaii for the Menehune. This past February, Discovery Plus premiered a new 2-hour special entitled Finding Bigfoot, The Search Continues. The special features the return of all 4 original cast members and focuses on utilizing new, advanced technologies to ultimately prove Bigfoot's existence. One of the hosts of that show is Cliff Barackman. He has been doing Bigfoot field research since 1994. His expeditions have taken him to 46 states and 5 continents in search of evidence supporting the existence of undiscovered hominoids worldwide. As the evidence analyst on Finding Bigfoot, Cliff has applied his skill and expertise to a variety of photographic, video, film, and sound evidence. He has appeared on many other television shows and documentaries as a Bigfoot specialist and cryptozoologist. Cliff is especially familiar with the footprint and handprint evidence of Sasquatches. Cliff and his wife Melissa own and curate the North American Bigfoot Center in Boring, Oregon, which features the largest public collection of Bigfoot evidence in the Pacific Northwest. Okay, let's get to our guest. We want to welcome Cliff Barackman onto the show. We are super excited to have him on. I have a ton of questions. Cliff, thanks so much for being on.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm always happy to participate in something like this.
Okay, great. Because I mean, I love the show, and I love what you do. It's been so much fun to watch you on Finding Bigfoot, and we just watched the special that just the recent special, the reunion special, which was great, and I have questions about that as well. But I always like to begin by asking how you got into this world. So was there a moment, an experience, or an incident or something that happened that sort of piqued your interest and led you to sort of dive into the world of cryptozoology?
No, it wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't like a light switch or something. It was, I've always been interested in weird things as a little boy growing up. I grew up in the 1970s as a, watching In Search Of and things like that. So I've always had weird, eccentric interests. I've always been a weird person, honestly. But when I was in college, I stumbled across a couple books in the college library. See, I had a couple hour break between classes, not really enough time to go off campus and grab lunch or anything. So I was way on the other side of campus, big campus, Cal State Long Beach, down in Southern California. And I would go through the library and just kind of pick books off of the shelf and subjects that I was interested in, mostly sciences and stuff. And one day I was roaming through the anthropology section, and I ran across a couple books that were collections of scholarly articles written by scientists and laymen as well, on Sasquatches. And that's when I first started reading about the evidence. And it was basically after reading those books, I kind of was thinking, oh my God, like not only are Bigfoots quirky and funny and weird and everything I love, but they might be real animals too, and I was already backpacking and camping. So I just kind of put that on the list of things to do while I was in the woods. But then I was specifically camping in Bigfoot locations where people had seen Sasquatches before. And that was back in 1994 that I started, camping purposefully for Sasquatch stuff. And, now I live and breathe it every single day.
So then once you sort of realized, what was the sort of the transition from, having this as something that you were interested in to then really sort of focusing a lot of your energy onto it? Like, where did you start?
Well, I started by, I was a teacher for the most part, most of my career until the television thing popped up. So I had summers off. I was in Southern California, which is a land of cement, basically. So I got the heck out of Dodge, but most I could, and would spend weeks at a time out in the woods. And it was on one of these trips, actually one of the first trips, I ran across footprints, and I thought, like, oh my God, I got this, but that's beginner's luck, and it happens a lot in a lot of different formats and not just Bigfoot. But and then I just kept reading. This is back in 1990, 93, 92, 93, 94. In that era, so kind of pre-internet in a lot of ways. Internet was in its infancy at best, and so I wasn't being barraged, and my mind wasn't being polluted by social media and YouTube. Because God, if you want to learn anything, it's one thing to go on YouTube to learn how to like change your oil. It's another one to go on YouTube and learn about Bigfoot. It's not a good idea. But so I got to go straight to the source. I was reading books by Dr. Grover Krantz, and I was reading books by John Green and those sort of people, like primary sources, basically the people who investigated the sighting reports themselves. So it really was the reading about it. It was the reading about the evidence and sighting reports, and more important to me, anatomical evidence, I suppose, footprint casts and things like that, and the congruency between all those things that really kind of pushed me over the edge into thinking that, oh yeah, these are real, done deal. Because I'm not one of those people I need to see it to believe it. I think that's foolish in a lot of ways, because have you ever seen an atom? Do you think they're real? Why do you think they're real? You think they're real because the evidence is there, right? You don't have to see something to believe it's real. I didn't see a mountain lion for a long time. I've seen quite a few now, but I mean, back in the day, I didn't see a mountain lion until, early 2000s or something like that. But I was pretty sure they're real. You don't need to see something. You just have to use your critical thinking skills and look at the evidence and weigh it for yourself.
You sort of have this niche of this evidence analyst. And was that just sort of the next sort of evolution of when, as you were looking at things and getting interested in it, you started to focus in on, I want to find the evidence. I want to show how credible this can be.
I'm not interested in showing, but I don't care about proving them. I don't care about telling other people they're incorrect if they don't believe in it. Mm-hmm. I don't care what other people think. I'm really a learner is what it comes down to, because I was an elementary school teacher for a living for 14 years before television grabbed me. I have very little interest in convincing somebody else of something that they're not interested in learning about. It's okay. I am interested in learning for myself. Teachers are lifelong learners. The best teachers are lifelong learners. They love to learn. And so I am interested in learning about these animals. And I am an educator. I still view myself as an educator in a lot of ways. Now I mostly educate about Sasquatch, what's available out there. Again, I'm not trying to convince anybody. I don't care what people think. A lot of people don't think Bigfoots are real, but there's a whole lot of people think the earth is flat too. And I'm not going to spend my time trying to convince them like this. That doesn't seem worth my time, so I don't know, that's kind of where I am. I'm not interested in, I'm interested in sharing what I love, and what I love is learning about Sasquatches and what I think I'm learning about them. But all the time I'm revamping my model. I don't know a lot about Sasquatches, but I think a lot about Sasquatches. There are things I think they do, and I'm constantly revising my model. At the end of the day, everybody has a model, and I know we're just talking Bigfoot here, so I'll just stick to that. Everybody has a model of what they think Bigfoot is. And hopefully, as more information comes in, if the information, the evidence, in other words, doesn't support what my model or anybody else's model is, hopefully they have the humility to revamp what they think. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to show anybody or tell anybody anything or prove anything to anybody. I don't care what other people think, honestly. So I'm just doing it because I love this, and I'm completely confident they're real. I know they're real. It's not a matter of I'm thinking they're real. I know they're real. And I'm just super interested in how they live, not if they live. That's a done deal. I'm interested in how they live. I'd love to film one. I'd love to see one in daylight. There's a lot of things I'd like to do. I want to continue learning about them. And that's where my focus is now.
Great. So when you come upon a piece of evidence, let's say like a footprint or cast of a footprint, what is it you look for? How do you analyze it?
Well, like if somebody brings in a footprint cast to the museum and they want to show it to me to see what I think, I look at the general shape. I look at the length to width proportion. I look at to see if it has an arch or not. I look for the telltale markers on the foot to try to discern if it could even be a Sasquatch print. Most stuff that is brought to me or sent to me on the internet with photographs and stuff frankly are not Sasquatch prints. It's a lot of wishful thinking out there, which is okay. At least people are paying attention and doing their best. And as long as they really want to know my opinion, I'm happy to share my opinion with anybody. As I often say, I'll be happy to share my 2 cents, though I acknowledge it may only be worth 1. But I look for the things like, can I help this person? And that's what I view it as. Can I help this person by maybe shining some light on what they found? And very often they're human footprints or bear footprints, or just some sort of composite marks in the ground from maybe an elk stepped in a few spots and has the shape of a footprint now. That happens a lot. There are all those things. So I try to approach every footprint that is shared with me, like what else could it be? And if I run out of things, or if it has a couple telltale markers in it, I go, oh yeah, that looks pretty good. And then you got to think about hoaxes, right? Because hoaxers are very sophisticated. They do their reading as well. They read the Bigfoot books and try to replicate Sasquatch footprints in their prosthetics or sculpts or whatever they're making the fake holes in the ground with. And the way you do that is actually, that's a long-term thing, unfortunately. It's very difficult sometimes. Well, it can be difficult. It can also be very easy to look at a print and determine whether it's fake or real. Okay, like clearly that would be a Bigfoot footprint. It can't be anything else. Now, is it real or not? Most of the time it's kind of easy to tell because they put things in the wrong spot or things look a little wonky or something. But sometimes there's this one set of prints that I have from out east that I have a left and a right that were cast back in 2019 in August. And one of the prints looks fantastic and the other one looks really wonky. I'm thinking, oh, if I just saw that one, I would think it was fake. But in taken as a whole and together, it's like, well, that one looks really good. I guess that, maybe they're real. That's neat. And now another footprint has come in from that same general area of that other wonky foot. And I'm looking at it now going, oh gosh, that's awfully similar to the other foot. And that's concerning because the Sasquatch feet are very, very bendy. They're very malleable. And they're so malleable that they can make a huge variety of shapes and, I'll just call them wiggly, okay? And to have 2 footprints from the same foot that show most of the same features is very concerning. So that is kind of now casting doubt on that other footprint that I think looks very, very compelling. So I don't know, but so that's why when people are out there Bigfooting and they get a footprint cast, it's really a shame when they only cast 1. The more footprints you can cast, the higher the chance of being able to tell if it's fake or not. And most of the time, and nowadays especially, like there was a hoax thing out in Texas Arcana sort of area, maybe about a year ago or something like that, or last spring or something like that. And they cast enough footprints where like I looked at one or two and I go, that doesn't look right to me, man. But when I saw all of them, like all 9 or whatever that they cast, oh yeah, this is totally fake, clearly fake. Which I guess I'm telling hoaxers that if you want to be a successful hoaxer, just cast one. But if you want to be a good researcher, you need to cast more than one is the thing. So that's kind of where it lies right now. There's a lot of things you look for. And the more information you have on that one set of tracks, the easier it is to tell if it's fake or not.
It's wild to me that there are people actively, trying to create hoaxes of big footprints.
It doesn't make sense to me either. Like, do people dress up as deer and run across the road in front of your car? And like, I think it's, I mean, I personally think it's a mental illness of some sort. Like, I really do think it's like some weird, I don't know. I'm not a psychologist. I don't know anything about that stuff, but I'm thinking these people are probably mentally ill because like of all the ways to try to get attention, because it's not a money thing. I guarantee you it's not a money thing. Or if it is, what are you going to do with your $600 and that's it, but of all the people you want attention from Bigfoot weirdos. Like what kind of that makes you exceptionally weird, downright mentally ill, in my opinion. Like, why do you want the attention of the Bigfoot community? We're so dysfunctional to begin with. Like, why would you want our attention? That's just, and they think I'm weird for thinking Bigfoots are real. I think those people are super weird for their whatever screwed up perception,
Yeah, I mean, and especially considering we had Lyle Blackburn on the show and we talked a lot about the stigma that's attached to seeing Bigfoot. I saw Bigfoot, and so how many people have actually had experiences seeing the creature but don't say anything because of the stigma that's attached to it. And so how difficult it is to get those eyewitness accounts, which would potentially shed so much more light on Bigfoot and on Sasquatches. And yet, there's that stigma. Have you run into that at all?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. And I have a database. I mean, 1,400 reports in my own private database. The BFRO, I'm good friends with Moneymaker and all those guys. I'm not a member of any group. I don't get along well enough with people to do that. I'm kind of I was kicked out of Boy Scouts. I'm not a joiner in that sort of way. I just don't handle organizations very well. I'm too chaotic neutral, but basically, I think the BFRO has probably 35, 40,000, 50,000 raw reports. And a lot of them aren't, Bigfoot, their questions, their inquiries, they're false, they're mistaken identity. So you cut that in half. So maybe 20, 30,000 reports. I would say that's maybe 1% of what actually people see. Like if I'm with a friend and we get into the BFRO database, like if I'm with Matt and Matt wants to show me the BFRO database for Oregon, I can compare his database to mine. And I'll tell you, I have way more reports in mine than Matt does in his of Oregon, because I live here, and that's the thing. If you're in an area and your beacon is up, and people come to you, like moths to a flame. If you are asking people, hey, have you ever seen one? If you put some cards around, like call me if you see one of these things. If you have a Bigfoot museum, people come to you. I have quite a few more reports from my immediate area than the BFRO does. And the BFRO is by far the best and largest database out there. It's most people don't talk about it. Most people don't talk about it unless they're very safe. I had one woman last year in June come in here. Her 94-year-old dad or something was in the car. She just came in the shop. She goes, hey, do you own? Yeah. I just think you should know that I think I saw a Sasquatch. I go, really? Tell me about it. And she did. She thought she saw a guy, thought it was a fisherman wearing a fur hoodie going down to the river. And then she realized that's not a fisherman, too big. And, and then she told me, she goes, great. And then she left. And that was it. She's not telling anybody else. Why would she? She's not trying to get attention. She might think it's important enough to share with somebody. And she did. She came in to tell me. But most people don't talk about these things because there is a stigma associated with it. Even still, although I do kind of think that Finding Bigfoot, the TV show, helped that in some sort of way, because I get a lot of a lot of positive reinforcement, a lot of kudos from people who have seen Sasquatches and also watched the show. And they said that, watching the town hall meetings made them feel a lot better, thinking that they weren't the only ones. And that just like put a little bit of their angst to rest. So.
Yeah, no, the town hall meetings are awesome. I love when people go and then they mark the spots where they've seen it, and you get this, this sort of this corroboration just happening in real time. It's a very cool aspect of the show. And speaking of the show, did you it ran for 9 seasons, which is incredible. Did you ever did you think that it was going to become as wildly popular and it would take you all around the world?
No, I thought we'd get like, I thought it might be popular because I think that I love Bigfoot. So finally they're making a show about something I give a damn about, right? So I thought like maybe it would be popular, but I thought maybe we could, like 4 seasons or something out of it, if we're lucky, because most shows go an average of 2, maybe 3 or something like that. So I thought maybe we'd squeeze 3 or 4 out of it, but I didn't think we'd go for 9 years. That's pretty remarkable, and even in television in general. I'm very, very blessed. In lots and lots of ways because of that. And really, it was the most amazing. It was amazing in a lot of ways, honestly. But one of the ways it was extraordinarily amazing was that it was an education. I've gone to more film sites of Sasquatches than pretty much anybody else except for my colleagues on the show. I've got to do more analyses on these things, and you can go to my website, cliffbarackman.com, to go check out a lot of my field reports, because every photograph, every film, everything I can, every handprint, every footprint that came across my desk during finding Bigfoot, I did an analysis on, and many of those are published, if not most of those are published on my website. It's a sign of a good researcher. A lot of TV shows don't do it, or the people or the cast members don't. They're actors or something, so they don't really pay attention, or they're faking stuff or something. But when something came to me, I analyzed it and I put it out there for everybody to check it out, to check out. And I think that's the least we can do as researchers. But yeah, it was really an educational experience about Bigfoot and like what they look for. What they look for in Kentucky is the same thing they look for in Oregon. The kind of terrain and habitat and strategic possibilities that they are looking for on the East Coast, they look for on the West Coast, and they look for in the middle of it. Bigfoots are Bigfoots. They're individuals, but at the same time, they're a species, and the species has certain affinities. And that was a really eye-opening thing for me in a lot of ways. My eyes were open in many ways on finding Bigfoot about Sasquatches. It was a really, really cool opportunity.
What would you say was sort of the hardest thing about filming a show of this nature?
A couple things, but the hardest thing had to be the lights. Just because, without lights, you can't see anything. And if you're not seeing anything, it's not TV anymore, it's radio, and we were making a TV show. And so, and the producers, like we would go, no, you need to shut off all the lights, cover those LEDs on the cameras, be quiet, and they're saying, like, if you're not talking, no one's hearing anything. If we're not filming something, no one's seeing anything, we don't have a show. And we're going like, yeah, but we're not going to get Bigfoots, and that's why I got a lot of heat. Obviously, I still get a lot of heat, but I get a lot of criticism for like, you guys are never going to run into Bigfoot like that. You got to go out and put anti-scent things on and sit in a tree stand for 3 days and not make any noise and blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, I get that, but what a terrible TV show that would make, like there's another hour and a half of Cliff in a tree stand. That'd be terribly boring, right? So we did it the opposite way. Bigfoots, if they have any weakness at all, it's because they're smart and they're curious, right? So we can't be out there quiet. We can't. We've got, you might see Bobo and I wearing those backpacks, but there's a camera person, there's a producer, there's probably a sound person, there might even be another producer. There's like 4, 5, 6 of us out there sometimes tromping around, and every 45 minutes to 55 minutes, we have to go down. We have to change the batteries out in the GoPros. We have to change the cards out. We can't run out there. They have to change the tape out in the big camera. They have to do this and that and everything. And it's like, there's no way you can be all slinky and stealthy and elude the detection of a Sasquatch. So you have to do the opposite. You have to make a heck of a lot of noise. And then maybe one will come in and look at you. And it worked. We had observations of Sasquatches on the show. We never filmed one. And I'm the first to admit that. People are, hey, you find them yet? Yes, we found them. You don't watch the show, but we never filmed one. I'm with you there, and it was frustrating. We got real close a couple times, but yeah, we did the opposite. We went in big and made a lot of noise, and it worked sometimes, and sometimes it didn't. So that was really frustrating. The light thing was aggravating, and also the time constraints. Because if we ran across one, normally I'd want to spend a few more days there and get to know the area and stuff. But we had a production schedule. I mean, the reality of a TV show is that, okay, Animal Planet, right? The network gives the production company, I don't know how much, like $300,000 or something. And they say, go make us a TV show and make us happy at the same time, please. And okay, so, and they're going, holy crap, $300,000 or whatever, right? Or however much it costs. I don't know how much it costs, but yeah, so they give them a ton of money. Go make a TV show. And then they start planning. They plan for 3 months before we put boots on the ground in any location. And they're not planning like I think a lot of TV shows, by the looks of it, they plan the storyline beforehand, and they plan what they're going to find. And we never, but our show is really different. They got real Bigfooters to do it. And you can ask any of our producers. You can listen to my podcast where we interview the producers. They say, this was unlike any other show I've been on. The most real show we've ever done. And they just kind of put us in a situation where we wanted to go. See, they were pulling the strings at first, and we were going, you guys are like LA jerks. You don't know anything about Bigfoot. Why would we do it? We've been doing this for a couple decades apiece. You should listen to us. And eventually, after the first season, they started to. And they realized, oh, these guys are right. They know what they're doing. We don't. And then they would let us choose where to go. And we would tell them, oh, this is the area in Mountain Hood National Forest we want to focus on. They'd go get permits for that and stuff. And then when we started having a little bit more control of the show, that's when we got really successful with the Bigfoot thing. But I totally forgot where I was going with that now, but I guess it doesn't matter.
No, that was great. But I mean, throughout the show's run, you guys were exposed to so much evidence and credible stories of sightings in those town halls. And even in the show's reunion, episode, there was some incredible evidence and these sightings from these eyewitnesses. If you had to, this is a tough question, but if you had to pick maybe a sighting or a group of sightings or a piece of evidence to that you would point to and say, if you're the least bit skeptical, look at this and check this out, because this is amazing.
No, that's hard to do. You just can't do it. And in fact, I was talking to Dr. Meldrum about this just a few months ago. Everybody wants a soundbite answer. Everybody wants one piece of evidence you can put everything on, but that's not the compelling part of this. If I had to bring up something, I would point out, okay, without exception, every native indigenous group in North America has stories of giant hair-covered people living in the woods outside of town if they live in suitable habitat. And that goes back before white contact, So if explain that, skeptics, is the thing, and they would say, oh, it's the Jungian archetypes and all sorts of other whatever things. But no, I mean, why would they have the same behavior as what we know apes do nowadays? And none of that stuff was known until the 1960s when Diane Fossey and Jane Goodall was in this stuff. So if I had to point to one thing, it would be that, but that's not like rock solid, that's not something that you can build a house on. The most compelling evidence is really how all the evidence fits together and supports one another and is congruent. And what I mean by that is this. Let's start out with the footprints, for example. Sasquatch feet are not like human feet. They superficially look like human feet, but they're not really very much like human feet. The metatarsals are shorter, the heel has been elongated, the ankle bone's been pushed forward a little bit on the foot, all for biomechanical reasons. You can't have a mass of 800, 900, 1,000 pounds walking on a human foot. It doesn't work. The foot would have to be redesigned for the biomechanics of walking. And the ways that it would have to be redesigned are what you get in the Sasquatch foot. So if those feet are hoaxed, the footprints are hoaxed, whoever hoaxed them knew about the biomechanics of human bipedalism, okay? Now, those particular ways that they're different are also kind of interesting. For example, the flexibility in the mid part of the foot, that was first seen, I guess, and explained by Dr. Meldrum, who is an expert in primate foot anatomy and how it led to bipedalism. So he's uniquely qualified, I think, for studying Sasquatches. The flexibility of the mid part of the foot, we saw evidence of that, but we didn't know what it was pointing to. And I say we, this is the Bigfoot community. I was aware of like the Lyle Laverty footprints from the Patterson-Gimlin film, showing the feature, the mid-tarsal pressure ridge, that is the result of the front half of the foot pushing off and leaving a mound right behind the first half of the foot, as opposed to right in front, right behind the toes where it is in humans. That mound is in a different place in Sasquatches. And it turns out that that's evidence, that bend in the foot at that particular place is congruent with the other ape species and most human ancestors as well. We didn't start developing an arch until very recently, it turns out, our genus. So that's all fine and good and interesting and very compelling, or at least it should be to anthropologists and that sort of thing. But then you take the Patterson-Gimlin film, okay? You can see her foot flexing in that same spot in the film. You can see that. You can also see how the ankle seems to be elongated, okay, in the film itself. And in 1970 or 1968, 69 and 70, when they're shopping the film around and showing people, the anthropologists say, oh, look at that heel. No, it looks like it's wearing slippers. That's not real. That's not the way people's feet. You're right. It's not how humans' ankles are. But in order to carry a mass of her size, 500 pounds or something, you actually have to have that. You see, the ankle, the way it works, and this is a little lesson here. Your foot is a simple machine, right? Remember those lessons from junior high science class. It turns out that your foot is a type 2 lever. Well, everybody knows what a wheelbarrow is. A wheelbarrow is also a type 2 lever. Okay. So what happens is that the tendons and ligaments attached to your ankle bone. I'll do this. Tendons and ligaments attached to your ankle bone, and then your calf muscles pull up on them, and that moves your foot, and that's how we walk. Okay, basically it, right? Let's go back to the wheelbarrow for a minute. Put a bunch of weight in the wheelbarrow, you lift up the handles. Okay, that's hard. That sucks. Okay, put a bunch more weight in the wheelbarrow. You could work harder, and it would suck worse to lift it up, but you can actually modify the wheelbarrow to make it easier. You can make the handles longer on the wheelbarrow, and it would actually be a lot easier to lift up. Now, of course, you have to lift it up further, so the same amount of work is done, but it's easier to do. It takes less effort to do. Well, that's what the ankle bone on the foot is. If you elongate the ankle bone, it's like elongating the handle on a wheelbarrow. And therefore, the calf muscles don't have to pull as hard to lift the mass up like that. So that's just one example, by the way. We can see that those two features of the foot in the Patterson-Gimlin film that happens to be, coincidentally, according to the skeptics, exactly how the foot should be redesigned to carry a mass of their size. And you can see evidence of that in all the foot, or many of the footprints dating back to 1958. You can see evidence of those same features, even though Dr. Meldrum did not publish a paper letting the rest of us people in the Bigfoot community who are not anthropologists and scientists at that level. He published that in the year 2000 or 2001. I think that's fairly compelling.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. So there's not a soundbite, one piece of evidence sort of thing I can point to. It's kind of how it all fits together. I often say, you know what it is? It's like having a jigsaw puzzle. And if you hold up one little piece of a jigsaw puzzle and you go, oh, look, it's a cute little kitty cat in a mug. No, it's not. You don't know what it is until you put all the pieces together, and then you can plainly see. And in this case, you have to put a lot of pieces of the puzzle together. And then when you do, it is clear and obvious. Sasquatches are in fact real animals.
No, I love that. That is the idea that the preponderance is the evidence. Like, it's not the specific, it's the entire, sphere of evidence that's been found.
And how they fit together.
Interrelates and speaks to all these different aspects of Sasquatch. This is a question we like to ask. If you had unlimited funding, like if some version of Tony Stark, comes in, has a ton of money and wants to give it to you to go out and just, learn more about Bigfoot, maybe find it, and capture a photo or video. Where would you begin? How would you go about that? And also, what might be the sort of what's the most exciting new technology you might want to utilize in that?
Where would I want to go? Coastal British Columbia. although I don't know the area very well, so I probably wouldn't choose there. It seemed like it'd be a waste of a lot of that money I was given. I would go to an area nearby my home because this is the area that I study the most. This is the area where I'm most acquainted with the habits of the Sasquatches. And this is where I have the most data from. So I would make the best use of that money in that sort of way. I would go nearby, probably to one of these off-limit watersheds that we have nearby that kind of feed, like Bull Run watershed is a great example. It's a huge area, miles and miles and miles and miles. No one's allowed in it because it gives Portland, Oregon, the water supply that we use, you know? So no one's allowed in there. But the Bigfoots don't care. They're the ultimate anarchists. They do whatever they want. So they're inside there. In fact, I've had retired water worker employees write to me about their sightings inside a Bull Run watershed. It's a very interesting area, not far from where the museum is and where I live. So I would work in that area because it's a confined specific area. Not that the Bigfoots stay inside there, but I think that's kind of home base. As far as the technology, there's a technology that the government has that apparently can see through buildings. They can, check me out right now if they care about what little Cliff is doing, and see some sort of shape, kind of like the superhero movies. They have that kind of technology too, right? I think that would be really useful for looking through the tree cover. Because the whole thing, like people are all on fire about drones and pairing that with thermal imaging and stuff. And that might be a really wonderful way to do it. But my question is always, how do you get the Bigfoots to step out from underneath the trees, Because thermals can't see through trees. And, they're basically apes. They're very human-like apes. But then again, humans are apes. So yeah, they're basically apes, just like we are, or similar to we are. And they like staying in the thickest stuff. They're going to be in the thickets and the willows and the brambles and stuff. That's where they feel comfortable. That's where they're feeding. That's where the other animals are. So how do you get them to step out? Well, if you can just ignore that question and then look through the plants, that would be a different deal. I think that would be a very interesting way to do it. It doesn't have to be satellite technology, but I do know that satellites can read my license plate. So they can certainly get a good picture of a Sasquatch if they can see through the tree covers. I think it'd be really neat to have some sort of air surveillance that could find them, photograph them and track them, and then deploy ground units to the area to try to get close to them, and then film them. To prove it, you're gonna have to kill one. I'm not a shooter. I probably shouldn't be armed looking for human-shaped things in the woods. I'm not the guy to shoot one of these things. That's just not me, And I think it's kind of rude at the same time. I don't want to shoot one. But that's what it takes. And if you want to prove one of these things, coordinated effort with that kind of technology, putting people on the ground to get close to these things, to either film it or shoot it or something, might go a long ways to, solving this mystery. Frankly, I'd just rather film one because I already know they're real. And as I mentioned earlier, I kind of don't care what people think. People think, oh, that's because you're making money off it, Cliff. If you saw how much money I made, you wouldn't throw that at me. My bills are paid and I have a very low standard of living. Like I'm not rich and never will be, that's ridiculous to accuse me of that, I think. But yeah, I don't really care if they're proven because I already know they're real. Who am I trying to prove that to, right? I just want to learn about them. But to prove it, you're gonna have to do that. But a combination of that kind of technology might get it done faster. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see the first Discovery Channel documentary on Sasquatches. I would be thrilled. That's one of the only, and besides protecting the species, that's one of the only reasons I can even think of why would I want to prove it. It's like, I want to see a cool documentary on them, So.
Well, I would, that's sort of my next question is, we never really think about what will happen when we find one, how the world will react. Are we worried about how that would impact such a incredibly secretive creature that, that has been hiding for so long? What do you think about that? Like, are you worried about sort of the aftermath?
Oh yeah. Well, sometimes I worry about, I worry about them. I really do. Cause I really care about them. I'm a compassionate softie is what it comes down to. And they've also given me so much. Sasquatches have given me a lot of my best friends. They've given me the TV show, and through the TV show, I met my dog. We found my dog tied to a tree out in the woods as bear bait. So we rescued my dog, and she rescued me in a lot of ways. And I met my wife on the show. She was a production assistant, came on the show, and I go, "Ooh, who's that?" And I eventually convinced her to marry me. The Sasquatches have given me, my museum. I wouldn't have what would my museum be about if it wasn't Bigfoot, right? Bigfoots have given me everything that's important to me in my life, virtually. And so trying to give something back to them, I think, is real important. And do they need protection? Not yet. They're doing a really good job protecting themselves at this point, and I'd leave it to them. I think they got it covered at this point. I'm not too worried about them. But as soon as they're discovered, yeah, they're going to need protection from us, right? It's not. I don't think people will go out and try to shoot them and stuff. I could be wrong, but I'd like to think that the American public is more enlightened than try to shoot human relatives. Like, I don't think if gorillas lived in North America, people would try to shoot them either. This isn't Africa where they're starving to death and they have to eat bushmeat or something like that, like they do in Africa, and killing chimpanzees to eat them and things like that. I don't think that's our thing here in North America, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we are that level of horrible monsters. I don't know. Maybe we are. But I do think a lot about the consequences of discovery, which is why it goes back to what I'm doing again. I'm basically educating about Sasquatches now. You know, I don't teach science and math and reading any longer. I teach Bigfoot. And because when I look at the human species and all of our most evil acts, all the atrocities, you know, the genocide of you name what you like, I'll say North American native people, but at the same time, like, well, how many genocides have humans done? Like countless. We're always trying to kill all of one kind of person out of fear and ignorance, right? And the ignorance is the key. I don't want Sasquatches to be treated like monsters like we see in all the horror movies. They're usually treated as monsters. They're the rampaging creature that comes and kills everybody and dismembers them. That's not Bigfoot. And that's the way gorillas used to be treated as well. My mother, when she grew up in the 1940s and 1950s, she watched the monster movies and gorillas were the bad guys. You know, she used to say, Cliff, watch out for the gorilla under your bed. And it scared the hell out of me, right? Well, Diane Fossey kind of showed us that that's not the way gorillas are. They're shy, reclusive, timid animals, basically. Yeah, just don't mess with them. They're wild animals. They could tear you apart, but they don't, generally speaking. And I think that Sasquatches are getting a bad rap with the TV shows and the movies and all that sort of stuff, and by and large. You know, even Finding Bigfoot. Come on. But then again, you know, like a Sasquatch, a real Sasquatch of like looking at you, turning around, walking in the woods isn't that exciting. I get that. But I don't want them to be treated that sort of way. So in my efforts of educating the public on Sasquatches and how they really are and not how people perceive them as, maybe I can do some good, you know, because you only get one first impression in life. And do I want that first impression of the Sasquatch on the North American public to be a bloody corpse on a slab? Or would it be better for them? Would it be better for the species if somehow I obtained like extended footage or repeated footage of a female interacting with its young? What would paint a more beneficial picture of the creatures, of the species? You know, I think we all know the answer on that one. And that's where my effort lies.
The fact that they haven't been found, at least in some, you know, that there hasn't been this incredible video footage or photo or a body really speaks to skills that are pretty amazing. And I thought maybe could you talk a little bit about maybe why you think it hasn't, these creatures haven't been photographed really well, or video footage hasn't been plentiful, or whatever it might be. You know, what would it take for a creature like this to survive for so long undetected?
Well, you can actually, if you could hypothesize a species and ask, what would it take for a creature of that size to remain undetected? And you go down the list, and most of the things line up very well with what we now know about Sasquatches. First of all, a very low population number. That helps a lot. There are not very many Sasquatches. I mean, there may be 5 or 10,000 in North America, which sounds like a lot, but we're talking about North America, man. North America is huge, and that counts Alaska and Canada. Most of Canada doesn't have a lot of people in it. You know, most of the population lives by the border, and up further north, it's very thinly populated. There's a whole lot of land for these things. Even in Pacific Northwest, where I live, Northern California to Southern Alaska, which I'll include, you know, BC and stuff in, British Columbia. Dr. Grover Krantz, who I'm going to assume knows a lot more about ecology than I do, because I'm just a guitar player. I have a degree in music, you know, I'm just a nerd. But he hypothesizes that there's maybe 2,000 Sasquatches from Northern California to Alaska, which sounds like a lot until you start looking at the numbers and how many square miles there are. When you break that down, that's about 275 square miles for each individual Sasquatch. That's kind of a lot. That's a lot of land, especially out here, man. You could hide 10 feet off the trail and never be found. It's a lot of land for each individual Sasquatch, and they don't seem to live as individuals. They seem to live in small family groups, a group of 2 or 3 around one particular area. So the first thing is low population numbers. The second thing is like, well, gosh, when are humans out? Oh, we're pretty active during the day. Okay, well, I want to avoid humans. I'm going to be active at night. Check. Sasquatches are largely nocturnal, not exclusively, but largely nocturnal. When you look at the sighting reports, what you find is about 60% of sightings happen during the day and about 40 at night. Well, let's tweak the numbers and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, for the sake of simple math, let's just say it's half and half. It's not. It skews more to the day, but let's just say it's half and half. Well, how many people are out at night versus out during the day in those kinds of areas? Let's be generous and say 10%. How far can those people see when they're out in those areas at night? Again, let's be very generous and say 10%. Even with those very rough, squishy numbers, that right there indicates 100 times more Sasquatch activity at night. The numbers are clear. The data is clear. Sasquatches are largely, but not exclusively, nocturnal. So there's another thing they have going for them. Now, add to that their uncanny ability for hide and seek. They look like their environment. They are the colors of their environment. They are they look like stumps. We had a wonderful sighting outside of Stevenson, Washington, and Skamania County back on April 14th this year, just a few months ago. I did an on-site investigation. I've interviewed the witness twice now. I even got a cast taken at the location. It happened 100%. He saw this thing from 12 feet away. He almost hit it in his car. He swerved. His car stopped. It's standing a few feet in front of his hood. One of his headlights was all cockeyed and was lighting this thing up. He had the best look of a Sasquatch, pretty much of any witness I've ever spoken to. And I asked, what color was the fur? And he goes, that's a hard question. It was black with red and lighter brown. It was dark. But when you looked at it, there were a lot of colors in there. And he said it looked just like the forest. All right, so super camouflage, right? All right, got it. Super camouflage, low population numbers, largely nocturnal. Add to that their intelligence level, and let's add to that the arrogance of humans. Humans vastly underestimate Sasquatches in many, many ways and the terrain in which they live. But our greatest sin is vastly overestimating ourselves. We are worthless at night. Okay, we don't go off trails. We can't see in the dark. We are weak and small. Even our badass, like gnarly outdoor guys, you got nothing on a Bigfoot. Absolutely nothing. It's like chasing down a bear. You know what I mean? Without dogs, because I'm sure there are hunters going, I've chased down a bear. You got dogs, you got guns. Chase one down. That's a different story. You know, don't tell me how awesome you are until you do it. Put a knife in your teeth and run after that thing, and then show me how awesome you are. Those are just some of the things. Sasquatches are I believe they're super tuned into the sounds of their environment. They don't need to see us to keep track of us, because gorillas don't need to see their troop members to keep track of them. As they all move through the jungle, they can't see each other. They keep track of all 20 or 10, 20 gorillas in their troops by listening for them. Sasquatches do the same thing. I'm pretty confident of that. That's my hypothesis at this point. And I could go on. There's a lot of reasons that we don't have better evidence at this point, but also we've got kind of a lot of good evidence too. I have access to a couple photographs that I'm not allowed to put out there that are very good, very good. And why don't they want them out there? Why do we offered to give them money? We offered to give them all sorts of stuff for the TV show to put this one particular picture on camera. And they said, I don't want the attention. I don't want people to think I'm crazy. All I want is to be able to hunt my hunting lease and not be afraid. And you can't give me that. It goes back to the stigma thing. I think once Sasquatches are proven to be a real species, pictures and videos are going to come out of the woodwork. It's going to be insane how much people have lying around their house are just not willing to share, because a lot of times the people who live out in these very rural areas where these things are more common, and they might get used to the people and hit the apple tree a couple times a month or something, where these people can actually get pictures of them and stuff. Those people, sometimes the most valuable thing they have is their reputation. Why would they risk that for an animal that nobody else thinks is real?
I totally agree. I mean, once you get that, once it feels safe enough, that you have some sort of outside affirmation, you go, yeah, I did. I saw it. I mean, it seems like, sometimes when you guys maybe go in to do these town hall meetings and you bring people in, it starts to pull these people together, and they're in a room with other people that have also had these experiences. It sort of puts you at ease because you're not the only one. You're not the crazy one.
Yeah. I've actually spoken to witnesses who were in the room at a town hall meeting and still didn't share, but they came to me privately afterwards. It takes a lot to stick your neck out. And I mean, not everybody's as stupid as I am who's willing to go on TV and say Bigfoots are real. I get a lot of flack for that, but a lot of people, like professionals in some ways, business owners. I mean, I own a business, but I own a Bigfoot museum, right? So it's different. But people who they don't want, like cops. Like I've spoken to a fair number of cops who have seen these things, but they're not going to tell anybody else, because what is that scumbag defense lawyer going to say when the cop's on the stand trying to put somebody in jail? They're going to bring up, oh, so I understand you're a Bigfoot witness. Ah, there goes my credibility. There goes the guy. The murderer walks free. You know what I mean? There's a lot at stake for coming forward and saying you saw one of these things.
We had Stacy Brown Jr. on a couple of weeks ago, and he, in his movie, he had interviews with park rangers. And he talks a lot about how, the park rangers would come to him with stories. And in his movie, the guy was anonymous, and he talked about what happened when we had Lau, and we talked about police that would come forward, but wanted to stay anonymous, did not want anybody to know that they had seen it. But here are some really incredibly credible eyewitnesses that won't come forward, because of that, that stigma.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. And, people in high places do see these things. I was lucky enough this past year, Forest Service, it started reporting things to me. Like when they got a report from somebody, they said, well, we kind of don't care, but this guy does. And then they pass on the information to me, which is fine. I can totally see why the Forest Service doesn't care. It's like, why bother until it's accepted? Because you just have to put together $1 million management plan and try to study these things, and when you start at square one, it'd be horrifyingly difficult. But people in high places do in fact see these things. I have unverified reports, but from multiple sources, that at least 2 members of Congress have seen these things.
All right, I'm going to bring in my co-host real quick. Chris, do you have a question for Cliff?
Yeah, first of all, this has just been riveting. Just loving every minute of it. I just wanted to say out of the gate, watching the In Search Of, the search continues, man, when you had that town hall and you asked who had a sighting and every hand went up, it looked like every hand. I don't know.
Well, to be fair, if you're talking about the 2-hour special, that's during these times of COVID. I think we had 12 people in the room. So, that was a little easier to get every hand up. So
awesome, though. That was a great moment. And that was when that's when I just sat up and said, okay, you got my attention.
Well, a lot of those witnesses were lined up for us by Dr. Russ Jones, one of the best investigators in that part of the country. He's a chiropractor out of Charleston, West Virginia, a real solid guy. He's in the woods 2 or 3 days a week. He's a great researcher and a good friend. And so that's part of the reason we were so successful on the show also, because, I want to point out that lots of times we went out on the show and didn't get anything. And that's how you can kind of tell that, oh yeah, like these guys might be legit. I actually had people writing in, hey, why don't you go out with those guys on the other show? They get stuff every time. And I go, that's why we don't go out with them, because they get stuff every time and nobody does, But, we're batting 50%. And God, in baseball, if you're batting 50%, you're a Hall of Famer, right? So yeah, but we had our cards stacked for us because we know the researchers in all parts of the country. We went to West Virginia. First guy we called was Russ Jones. He knows West Virginia better than anybody. And he had the most recent reports, including stuff that happened within a week of when we landed. That's the kind of intel that we have, because you have me. Bobo, everybody loves Bobo. And Moneymaker has a nationwide network of sighting reports and investigators. There you go. It's who you know. It always is who you know. So we knew we were going to West Virginia. He lined up a couple things. We had a good photograph to look into at the Humphreys location. And when we got there, Russ comes up. Yeah, we got 2 reports in the last week. And we had one of the guys, we got a cast that blah, 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 and it lined it all up. And it was perfect.
Well, this conversation has really expanded my mind. I mean, beyond what was there before, beyond the show, the TV show, really expanded my mind to hear you talk about this in this setting. I don't know. It just feels like I just really appreciate the breadth of what you're saying. Another part of the show that stood out to me, when you start talking about the prints on the toes, I guess like similar to a fingerprint.
Dermatoglyphics, they're called.
Have you guys found two prints that match yet, or do they are there two casts where you can start to tell that the those formations are like matched up?
Yes and no. And actually, let me burst your bubble first. That's always fun. Which is a problem with me, because if you ask me a question, I'm gonna tell you the truth about everything I can. A lot of the footprints that were reported to have dermatoglyphics on them, turns out, yeah, they have dermatoglyphics, but there's complications. For example, let's see. Well, okay, the Onion Mountain footprint from 1967, that one is actually casting artifacts, not dermatoglyphics as far as I'm concerned. The Wrinklefoot footprints from the Blue Mountains in 1986, I believe, had to double check that, from Table Springs. Those are almost certainly water striations that strongly resemble dermatoglyphics. Now, there are footprints with dermatoglyphics on it, guaranteed. And several of those have been touched by the investigator who was casting them. So are they big? Now, mind you, I'm saying this like the Elkins Creek cast from Georgia. You can see the hand mark in it. And you know, here's the thing, and you're thinking, oh, they're not placing those dermatoglyphics there on purpose. But since they touched it somewhere, we can't be sure that those dermatoglyphics belong to the Sasquatch that left the footprint. They might be the humans. And I think, and you might be out there in the audience or right here in the rooms here thinking, well, that's lousy. Why'd they do that? Think about it like this. You have a dog at home. You show a dog something for the first time. First thing it does is smell it, and then it puts it in its mouth, right? Because dogs, their primary sense is smell. That's their world is a world of smells, and all the other senses take second, third, fourth seat, fifth seat. Humans, you show a human something, and I see this every day in my museum. I see it every day. I'm doing conferences and stuff. They come up, oh, look at this. They don't look at it, they touch it. That's the first thing we do. Okay, we do look at it first, but then they touch it immediately afterwards. They want to touch the thing. Just like a dog, they smell it first, and that's us looking at it, and then the dog puts it in his mouth. That's us touching it. And I see, and people do it in the field. And it's not just, modern day researchers. Some of the Four Horsemen did the same thing. You can actually see finger marks in some of the oldest casts there are. It's just a human thing. And some of those footprints that have dermatoglyphics in them have indications that the researcher touched it before they cast it. Maybe they were touching it up. Maybe it wasn't very deep in one area. They want to make sure the plaster stayed in there. Maybe they were even sculpting it in some cases. We don't know. But I think largely it's touching it up or touching it out of curiosity. But having said that, there are other examples. One example is from, we looked into it in that 2-hour special on Finding Bigfoot that we released in February. The search continues on Discovery Plus. B. Mills, a female investigator in Southeast Ohio, got a line of tracks on a property, and it showed dermatoglyphics. And I don't have copies of the prints, so I can't say this with 100% certainty because I have yet to be able to analyze the prints. I don't own copies of them. I had about 45 minutes to look over 9 and 11, 18 casts. Okay, so that's the amount of time I spent with these. But to that first initial observation indicates that there are places on the digits, on the toes, that have dermatoglyphics on the same spot foot to foot. I have not had a chance to actually lift those dermatoglyphics and compare them or do anything like that, but I believe at this point we have the first example of repeated dermatoglyphics on the same part of the same foot in 2 consecutive prints. Yeah. I can't verify that though. I want to make that very, very clear. That would go a long ways towards verifying them not to be human prints, of course, or human dermatoglyphics introduced somehow, because that would be the argument. Dermatoglyphics don't come on any other kind of animal except for primates, and that's us and Sasquatches. So we have to be able to eliminate everything else except for that one possibility that we're hoping for. And that's our job as citizen scientists. Try to prove ourselves wrong. And if we can't, maybe we're right.
Very cool. I live in Nevada now. I do a lot of hiking in the wilderness. It's pretty barren out here, but you come across these remains of animals out in the desert that have just, you don't know what got to it, but strewn through a riverbed, pretty large scale animal bones and things. Have you come across remains that maybe point to this was probably Bigfoot's dinner or something like that?
I have not personally, but I've heard about places in Ohio actually where out in the Mennonite areas of Ohio, eastern Ohio, that they were observing Sasquatches and they were finding strange deer kills where the legs had been twisted and broken and then certain organs removed right away. And this isn't like, UFOs doing cattle mutilation stuff. It was pretty consistent in the way that the legs were broken, and usually the liver was removed first. Actually, Matt Moneymaker wrote an article about it back in the day. He was one of the first guys to kind of put that on the map, at least write articles about it. And also Archie Buckley and those guys in the Bay Area group in the early 1970s noticed the same thing. But I have not personally come across that, no. But I know other people who have. And in fact, there's one guy, John Mayenzinski is his name. He's a wildlife biologist, and he was actually one of the instrumental guys in the effort in the 1970s to protect the grizzly bears. And he's a very high-level guy. I don't think he has a PhD, but all the PhDs look up to this guy because he's a field guy. He would disappear for 6 months to go live with the mountain goats, and then study them and write papers about them. He's gnarly and wonderful and lovely. He's great. He noticed in his area in Wyoming that he was finding elk kills, and the elk had a certain vertebrae, broken, snapped in a weird particular way. But it was different than the vertebrae that were broken when, say, a grizzly bear or a mountain lion took down an elk. Those were very consistent in what was broken in them. So he's finding these strange elk carcasses with the heads broken or the necks snapped, with a different vertebrae broken. And it turns out that vertebrae was the same one that you can find on the smaller ungulates in Africa that the chimpanzees were going after and snapping their neck. So it was, again, suggestive, nothing you can take to the bank, but he was finding those and wrote a paper on it. It's a little hard to find out there, but it's on the internet. You can probably track it down.
Good stuff. Well, that actually reminded me of one other question I did have. You mentioned some books you read in the beginning that are maybe some older publications. I'd be curious could you recommend one that's still maybe in print or available to still be purchased that you found particularly keen on this topic from back in the day?
From back in the day? Well, the ones that I read back in the day was Man-Like Monsters on Trial by Halpin and Ames, which is a compilation of articles written by the people who presented at the 1978 Vancouver, British Columbia conference on Sasquatches, Man-Like Monsters on Trial. And another one was another compilation of journal articles from Northwest Anthropological Research Notes. And I think that the book itself is called A Scientist Looks at the Sasquatch. It was co-edited by Markotic and Dr. Krantz. So those two guys, those are the two books that kind of kicked me off and put me on this path. But nowadays, if you're going to buy a book and read it for a really good overview of some of the most compelling evidence and the analysis that's been done, but also written for the layperson. The book you want to get is Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science by Dr. Jeff Meldrum. So I think those are probably the most compelling books.
Awesome.
Legend Meets Science is very easily available. We sell them here in the museum, of course, but you can get them online and, Amazon or wherever you happen to buy books.
And we'll put all that information in the story notes for those of you listening. We'll go to Vic. You have any questions for Cliff?
Yeah, thank you so much for being on. This is a real treat, at least for me and the other guys I know, I'm sure. As we gather more and more evidence, and you've been doing this for so long, do you ascribe to the theory that there are multiple species, or in
North America or worldwide?
Maybe both, actually.
North America, no. There's no reason to think that there are multiple species. Lots of people point to, oh, but that one's a red color. This one's a gray. Well, look at our hair color right here on the screen, right? That doesn't. We're all the same species. But those are more aggressive, or those are bigger or smaller. None of that stuff makes a new species. There's no evidence that suggests there's another species here in North America. The Sasquatches are Sasquatches, but they're also individuals, and they have a wide genetic variation, just like we do. Sasquatches have a long life, and they don't have litters. They have one or two, maybe three at a time. Usually one, I'm guessing, or maybe two twins. So that's the recipe for wide genetic diversity. So we expect to see a lot of different kinds and shapes and colors and this and that. And as far as attitude goes, you catch me in the wrong day, you're going to think I'm a different person too, right? Attitudes are attitudes. They're individuals just like we are. Worldwide, well, there's certainly different species because there's evidence for that. Sasquatches here in North America, we all know what a Bigfoot is supposed to be or supposed to look like. You go to Sumatra, they have another unknown hominoid called the orang pendek. They max out about 3 to 5 feet tall. They have an abducted hallux, which is like a big toe that sticks off to the side like the other ape species. And so right there's two pieces of evidence that, oh yeah, those are different. Those are somehow different. The foot structure is different. That alone would make it a new species. Now, things like the Yeren in China, or the Yowie in Australia, or those sort of things where they look identical to Sasquatches. And so are they a different species? Don't know. Don't know. Probably not. I mean, they might be, though. I mean, just like in North America, we have black bears, but in Southeast Asia, they have sun bears. They occupy the same ecological niche, have a lot of the same habits, and they kind of look similar, but they're different species at the end of the day. We just don't know enough at this point. That's kind of an open question. Back in Eastern Europe, excuse me, back in Eastern Europe, they had this other critter called the almasty. Maybe it's a Bigfoot, and there's very little evidence of that at all beyond sighting reports. And I really don't put a whole lot of stock in sighting reports. I think the physical evidence is far more intriguing and compelling. But there's a few footprint casts. And one of the footprint casts in particular is strongly different. So it probably isn't a Bigfoot. And in fact, that one footprint cast strongly resembles Neanderthal footprints. So maybe what we have out there is a relict Neanderthal. We just really don't know. And of course, relict is a biological term in this case. It means a population that is still persisting, even though they were probably more widespread. Like all the ape species today are relic populations, because those apes used to be far more widespread, and there used to be a ton of other species of apes, and now we're down to 5 or something like that. So those are all relic populations. So we might have a relic population of Neanderthal, or maybe Denisovan, or some other species as of yet not discovered, or maybe Heidelbergensis. We don't really know. But the way evolution is, now that we know more about evolution than we did 40 years ago, it's very possible that we have some human ancestors or cousins thereof still persisting in small numbers in various parts of the world. I mean, even within the last 100,000 years, which I think all of us would agree is a blink of an eye geologically. It's not very long ago. In the last 100,000 years, we had Homo sapiens, we had Neanderthals, we had Homo denisovans, we had the last Homo erectus, we had Homo floresiensis, the hobbit species in Flores. We have the newest member of our genus that we know of, Homo luzonensis from the Philippines, only described in Nature, in the Nature Journal in May of 2019. We had Homo naledi, and I feel like I'm missing one or two. So we had like 7 off the top of my head in the last 100,000 years. If human beings are the only ones left, this is the only time in the last 6 million years that's true. That seems a little weird to me. So how many other species are out there? Don't know.
Is there an area of the world that has as much activity, or at least attention, as North America?
Not attention, no, because it's like wars. Whoever wins the war gets to write about it and like spin it their way, and that's what we're looking at here. The early researchers are all from British Columbia and Washington and that sort of thing, and at this point, most of the people have published here in North America. So Sasquatches are the most popular worldwide, I would say. Everybody knows about Bigfoot, right? But you go to different parts of the country. Like there's a lot of Russian immigrants where I live in the Pacific Northwest, a whole lot of Russians, because really this used to be a Russian part of the world. Russians lived here, and they still persist. Maybe they like the climate too. I don't really know. It's kind of cold, but if I run across a Russian guy and we're talking about Bigfoot, I said, "Yeah, tell me about the Russian Bigfoot." He goes, "Oh, we don't have Bigfoot. We have snowmen." Well, they use a different word for it, but it's the same thing, But they're all aware of snowmen, or what they call them. But it's just a local name for them. It's just a local name for an unknown hairy thing. So, but Bigfoot is worldwide the most popular because we have the most books and TV shows about them.
And you alluded to this, but I wanted to just confirm it with you. Do you give it any credence to the sort of high strangeness aspect that some people kind of attribute to Bigfoot, like traveling through portals or the ability to sort of cloak themselves or anything like that?
None at all. Yeah, none at all. And in fact, I think that perspective oftentimes does damage to the subject and puts us back further. And here's why. Again, I'm an evidence-based researcher. I focus my area of attention based on evidence. I build my models based on evidence. And when a new piece of information comes in that doesn't jibe with it, I rearrange my model based on the evidence. All we have for this other stuff are stories. And I just don't trust people's perception. I don't trust their observational skills. I would be the worst guy to put on a jury because I just don't believe anybody, because I've been around too many people that tell me crazy things. Now, mind you, I love weird stuff. That's probably why I'm here today. I told you at the beginning, I'm a weird guy. I've always been weird. I've always loved weird things. My weird beacon is up. But I've gone so deep into the Bigfoot thing, I no longer think Bigfoots are weird at all. The evidence doesn't point that way. If they were UFO riding interdimensional whatevers, why are they eating roadkill, man? Why? And I asked the woo folks, the WOO woo, right? I asked them, like, why would that be true? And they say, well, that's just what they like. Say, oh, well, isn't that a cop out? Like, why can't they just go to the holodeck and order a steak dinner or something like that? That's what I don't get. Why are they raiding people's trash cans? They've been seen doing that, and there's plenty of reports of them doing that. Yeah, and sure, and they would counter with, oh, there's plenty of reports of them talking to people telepathically in their head and stuff too. Yeah, yeah, I don't know. That's all. It seems so subjective. But I will say this: there are plenty of weird things in the universe. Plenty of them that I don't know anything about it. I don't have hypotheses about them, but because I started noticing a long time ago that that I don't think these people who are talking about telepathy with Bigfoots and all that, I don't think they're necessarily lying. I just think they're wrong. So I started asking around about this and that and whatever. And I ran across this one person. I was talking to him, and he was talking to the voices in his head one time, I guess, or whatever. And he told me that he asked them, the voices, if they're aliens. And the voices, he told me this, the voices laughed at him and said, sure, we're aliens, whatever doesn't scare you. I was thinking, oh, isn't that interesting? So maybe all these people who are running across non-corporal voices and who aren't, I don't know, mentally ill and talking in the back of their own heads. I'm sure that those people are there too. But the people who are actually sane, experiencing something very peculiar in their life. Yeah, just as keeping an open mind about things, because I know some people like this and they don't seem mentally ill.
They don't seem crazy.
No. Yeah. They just have an extraordinary weird thing that they describe, that they experience. And I'm thinking, oh, you know what? I mean, I wouldn't be too surprised if there's something out there that's more than happy to say there whatever doesn't scare you, as long as they can, but I don't know. I mean, that's not my thing. I'm not looking into paranormal stuff, man. I'm treating this like wildlife biology.
Yeah, totally. And along those lines of potentially scary things, we always like to ask our guests, in your course of your own adventures, what have you come across a terrifying incident, and can you talk about it, and what was it? Or have you heard stories from other people who anonymously may have told you or whatever, that you can share about their scary moments?
Well, I mean, Bigfoots are inherently scary animals. I mean, just like if you had a big old bear in camp, it'd probably, raise the hackles on your neck, There's been plenty of times I like to go alone. I like to camp alone a lot. And there's been plenty of times I'm out there and there's like one knocking over there that I get an answer over there. And I really have to have a good talking to myself sometimes, where I'm going, you really got to consider this a little bit more deeply before you transfer around the woods, Cliff, because you're in, you could be in a bad spot. So there's been a couple moments where I'm kind of thinking like, what the hell am I doing? But generally speaking, my most horrifying and scary things that have happened to me in the woods while on Bigfoot adventures have always been self-inflicted. I found myself 4 miles upriver from my camp at dusk. At dark's morning at Bluff Creek, and I'm like 3 or 4 miles upriver. Walked up there with my river sandals. I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and I have a peach in my backpack, and that's it. I was like, oh God, if I twist my ankle, I am screwed, and that kind of thing. And I'm like, I can't stop because I don't want to get hypothermia, and so it's always self-inflicted. My own stupidity is probably what will kill me in the end, I'm assuming. So my scariest moments have always been those sort of things, or like getting a little bit too close to the edge of the road while I'm driving, or, on the show, there were plenty of adventures. Like I crash landed in a hot air balloon one time.
I saw that.
That was a little scary, but look, I landed on Bobo and he was fat then. So I had landed on the soft thing. Those are some of the more horrifying things. Or what Moneymaker drove in England. That was scary because Matt is a very confident and fast driver, and of course you put that level of confidence behind a wheel on the wrong side of the road, from my perspective, then it gets even scarier. I was in the back seat. I just closed my eyes for the most part. So
that's great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Okay, so before we let you go, I would love to hear about your guitar playing. So I'm a bassist, and I was reading about you. You play a 7-string guitar, jazz guitars. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, you know what? Back when I was in school, kind of trying to find my way, I dabbled around in the sciences. I was a physics astronomy major for a while. Then I was goofing around with marine biology. But really, both the thing that put both of those career paths to bed for me was calculus 2. I'm not a fan of calculus 2. And I figured whatever this is, I don't want to do this for a living. Okay, I might understand it eventually, but I don't not now. And so I said, you know what, I got to major in something, because I was working in elementary schools as a teacher aide, and I was good at it, and I enjoyed it, and I thought this is a way I can give back something. I want to be, I don't, life isn't about making as much money as possible. It's about participating and giving something back, you know? So I go, teacher, you know, I can be a teacher, because it's basically, I can, you know, be as creative as I want, as long as I put the information needed in their heads, right? I can do that, because I'm a weird guy that's super creative, and I'm eccentric, and, you know, I'm immature. Kids love me. So I wanted to be an elementary school teacher, because I wasn't really great at anything. I was pretty good at most things, though. You know, I'm not a great guitar player, but I'm pretty good. I'm not a great drummer, but I'm a pretty good drummer. I'm not a great anything. I'm pretty good at most things, though. I'm a jack of all trades. And I figured, okay, elementary school teaching, got it, because I love all that stuff. And so I started along that path. But to get an elementary school teaching credential, you either have to go the liberal studies route, which I found boring. I didn't want to do that. Or you can major in something you really care about and then take a multiple subjects test where it kind of shows you're proficient at everything, which I figured would be no problem, because I'm pretty good at most things, as I said, if I care about them. And I'm not trying to be arrogant. It's just an observation, you know, like if I try it at anything, I can become moderately proficient, not too long, but not an expert in anything. So I decided, well, you know what? I love music. I'm gonna learn how to play guitar. You know, I mean, I already knew how to play guitar, but I wanted to study music, because I thought that music was I still think music is just a magical thing. You know, I mean, I think it's just phenomenal in ways I can't even put into words. But okay, well, I'm a guitar player, and there's a guy named Ron Eshte, who is probably the best guitar player I've ever run across. He was a student of Joe Pass, and he played. He's like if you took Joe Pass and combined him with Bill Evans, like harmonically, and put it on guitar. You know, he's a hell of a player. And he played 7-string. So I went to Cal State Long Beach, because that's where Ron was teaching private lessons. I got enrolled in the music department and got signed up with private lessons with Ron. I did all the other classical stuff, and I muddled my way through and learned this and that, the French step fifth, and all these other like ancient ways of making music, essentially, with the sole purpose of taking guitar lessons from Ron Eshte. You know, and luckily Ron explained music to me in a way that the classical music theory classes couldn't. So when they were talking about, you know, chord inversions and things like that, they were using the very specialized names for them. And I would think, wait a minute, what did Ron? Oh, that's this that Ron was telling me. Oh, I get that. Why did they put such a weird name on that? That's easy if you think about it in a different way. And Ron actually got me through all that stuff. And Ron played 7-string guitar, because the 7-string guitar, I don't know if you guys are guitar players, but the low string is an A, or is an E. The low pitch string is an E. Mm-hmm. And the next lowest pitch string is an A. Well, the 7-string guitar, I mean, this isn't Korn or one of those like thrash metal bands. What you do is you put a low A below the E. So any of the chord voicings on the neck, well, you just drop the bass finger down 2 strings on the same fret and use the same voicing, and then you have the same chord but a whole octave below that as the bass. And that's a pretty beefy bass, man. That supports a lot of notes up on top. So that's why I learned the 7-string guitar, because I wanted to understand music harmony. I'm not a melody guy. You know, I'm not a singer or anything. I'm not a melody guy, but I love harmony. You know, I love horizontal music as much as the horizontal music is cool. I'm sorry, but I love vertical music. You know, how the notes interact and create different colors, basically by interacting with one another proportionally. So, and a really neat way to do that is with a 7-string guitar, because you get such beef on the low ends when you do it. It's a playground, you know, and Ron always said, music is music. It doesn't matter the style. It starts one place, goes somewhere else, and comes back, almost always. And if you understand how, it's like the rules of the road, you know, you only have so many rules of the road, but you can drive anywhere you want. Mm-hmm. And music is the same way. There are certain rules. And mind you, I was a kid once too. I would say, I don't need rules. I just play what sounds good. Well, you know, that's ridiculous, because the rules exist because that's what does sound good. And it's kind of neat to understand why it sounds good. Yeah, go ahead. And it's not for everybody. Yeah, go play whatever music you want. But if you want to know why that sounds good to you, well, then music theory is awesome. Like if someone can explain it in a way that isn't insulting to you, like it's wonderful. And it's like everything that like punk rock music, my first band is a punk rock band, a Hortus Stellaris, right? And kind of punk rock. It wasn't like or anything like that. We're kind of weird, like early Chili Peppers punk sort of stuff. And all the stuff I look back now, and I didn't understand music theory very much back then. I started taking lessons around that time. So I started piecing things together. But I look back now and I can play those songs and go, oh, that's what I was doing. That's why that sounds good. Okay, I understand that now. Or it's kind of like you need to know the rules before you break them. And if you're going to break them, you might as well do it in a smart way and make some sort of sense, because that makes you a genius. I mean, why wouldn't you want to like break the rules on purpose, knowing that you're doing so, knowing that you're getting a really interesting novel result? I think that's cool.
That's awesome. So what does the future hold for Cliff Barackman? How can people find you?
I don't know. I mean, I can only see so far in the future. If you would have asked me that 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said here now. But so we'll see where I end up. But in the immediate future, I'm working most days at the North American Bigfoot Center. My wife and I own it. She works for me 1 day a week, so I can get 3-day weekends, because I usually come in on my weekends anyway. That's just what it's like being a business owner at this stage. We're kind of adding on to the museum now that COVID is slowly starting to fade a little bit. I mean, we're still in a situation, of course, but as things start loosening up a little bit and things are lightening up, we're getting more traffic and it's becoming more predictable in here. COVID almost killed the business. I dumped every penny I had into this place, like all the money that I'd saved on television, which wasn't much, but it was something for me because I'm used to being a teacher, right? Kind of broke all my life. I saved whatever money I could and dumped it into this business, and COVID almost did us in, but through the blessings and kindness of the Bigfoot community and the support of the community in general, we survived. Barely, but we survived. And now that things are becoming a little bit more predictable, I'm reinvesting that money into the museum and like redoing the displays, and we're also expanding a little bit. In the next couple of months, we'll be having at least a dozen, maybe up to 20 new displays. We're opening up another room that we have available to us. So that's kind of in the works right now. In the meantime, to kind of help ends meet and support the business too, I'm doing a lot of speaking engagements. 2 years ago in 2019, I did 21 speaking engagements throughout the year. During COVID, I did 4. And which was a stings, right? Because I don't take much money from my business. So that kind of helps augment my income a little bit. And also everything that I sell, all the tchotchkes and casts and whatever else that I sell during these conferences, all that money goes to the business to help support it and try to get it going. So, going from 21 to 4 really did a number on me. So I'm back up this year where I'm on July 10th, I'll be in Florida at, I think it's called the Great America Bigfoot Conference in Lakeland, Florida. The following week, I'll be up in Michigan, the Michigan Bigfoot Conference. 2 weeks after that, I'll be at Bolts and Brews in Bend, Oregon. I think that's on a Sunday at the end of No, I'm sorry. I lied. Actually, I made a mistake, which is almost the same thing, but not on accident. The last weekend of July, I'll be in Longview, Washington at Squatch Fest, which is always a wonderful event. And then August, I don't know if I have anything. And then I know I'm going to Minnesota and I'm doing the Bend gig at some point in there. In November, I'm doing Cryptid Con. I think it's in Lexington, Kentucky. All 4 cast members of Finding Bigfoot are going to be together for the very first time ever since the show. So that's going to be fantastic. And so if you want to get a picture with all 4 of us, that's probably your only chance to do it. So I've got a lot of special events coming up, speaking engagements and that sort of thing. And other than that, man, I've got a couple research areas that I focus on. I try to get out to the woods at least once a week. But luckily Connor and Keith, some guys who work with me here at the shop here, they're out there 2 times a week or more. So we're really canvassing the areas of interest pretty heavily at this point.
If people want to find out more about you, they go to your website, cliffbarackman.com, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, the 2 ways to find me, and again, it's not an easy soundbite. I'm either going to look up me, Cliff Barackman, either cliffbarackman.com or any of my social medias that are conveniently named after me, Cliff Barackman, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Or you can go to the museum, which I try to keep as a separate entity, although I understand we overlap a lot, which is North American Bigfoot Center. So at NorthAmericanBigfootCenter.com, or any like social media stuff, Facebook, whatever, blah, 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 -- North American Bigfoot Center. So we're pretty easy to find. And all of that stuff goes directly to me. or it goes to one of my Connor, who's my right-hand man, or my wife. And then if it's meant for me, it'll find me.
Cliff, we want to thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time. This was an incredible conversation, so informative. Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem at all. Happy to talk Squatch.
That was Cliff Barackman of Animal Planet's Finding Bigfoot. If you want to see more of Finding Bigfoot, the show, which ran for 9 seasons, but they just did a reunion special in February that's now available on Discovery Plus. So you just go to Discovery Plus and you can sign up and you can see that episode, which is a pretty amazing episode with a lot of evidence, a lot of eyewitness accounts. Guys, do you have any responses or reactions to Cliff?
Gosh, what a great guy. So cool. So many experiences. I love his approach to the whole thing being, just purely evidence-based and, molding his hypothesis over time. And when you do, speak with him and learn about all the things he's seen and kind of put together, it does, lend a very compelling overarching theme that these things are real, probably. And it's only a matter of time before we catch like a high resolution photographic evidence and proof, much like it took times it took decades before we caught a snow leopard on film, right? So Bigfoot is obviously much more elusive, but it seems like it's coming. And that's what I loved about this episode is he gives you a real sense of that, what's going on. It's very cool.
Wow, what a great guest, Todd. I just was hanging on his every word. I mean, everything he said, I was just fascinated by. And I tend to agree with him on a lot of his kind of philosophical approach. Who needs any specific piece of evidence when you've got such a glut of information coming from different sources, different sightings, different people from all over the place? Like that is the evidence. That is more credible than anything, in my opinion. Just how much a preponderance of information and physical evidence and sightings and all that. And I just really enjoyed him as a person, man. How knowledgeable everything he talked about. His academic approach. He dives so deep on things. So just really fun guest, and I really appreciated him.
I want to thank you all for joining us for this episode of The Creature Files. We invite you to go to the website at mythicalwildlife.com for more information. You can also report a sighting and maybe even wind up on the show. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/mythicalwildlife. And if you're watching on YouTube, please click subscribe and give us a thumbs up. Thanks again for watching. And until next time, always remember to heed your call to adventure.
The Creature Files. It might just save your life.